So whether it's format obsolescence of original audiovisual material, um, that can be a real problem in losing cultural heritage. For example, older videotapes that no longer have playback machines or necessarily have technicians that have the skills to be able to um, repair those particular machines. So that type of format obsolescence is something that is quite serious when it comes to risks threatening cultural heritage. Um, the other risk is degradation of media. So if material, especially if we're talking about audiovisual material or magnetic material, if it hasn't been stored or isn't currently being stored correctly in temperature and humidity environments that are controlled and even, then there's a big chance that that material can become degraded quite quickly. So there are several things that can happen within that degradation. Mold growth on those types of cultural items is quite significant, especially in humid environments, such as Northern Australia and Southeast Asia. We've seen that even quite modern audiovisual formats such as digital Betacam, if not stored correctly, can become quite degraded. The other point that I wanted to make when it comes to digital content, that's a real risk, is the ephemeral nature of digital. If we think about the inherent fragility, the impermanence, and the fleeting lifespan of digital information, such as digital information that's on the internet, we can't really guarantee the long-term access to a lot of material that's available on the internet. So that modern digital information is definitely at risk. And that's something as a part of the museum that we want to make sure that we don't rely on third parties to preserve or give access to that material. We need to make sure that we can preserve it and we can provide access ourselves from the museum.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Andrew. It is very interesting to learn that digital preservation today is not only about protecting collections, but also about dealing with technological change and long-term accessibility challenges. For my second question, how does the National Museum of Australia determine preservation priorities when dealing with at-risk collection that require digitization or digital preservation interventions?
Thank you. I've just posted our digital preservation policy in the chat that's available for everybody to take a look at, which is related to this question and also to all throughout our meeting today, I think. So please feel free to read that. So there are several priorities that we have at the museum when dealing with at-risk collections. One of them is related to the first question in the condition of the material. So say if we've got cultural objects that are stored on fragile material, maybe they could be stored on glass slides or negatives if they're images. We would determine that those, especially if they're acetate or nitrate, the degradation of those, if that level of degradation is high, then we would definitely say that that condition has, the particular condition has made it more at risk. so that we would prioritize material that is in poor condition. And that would not just be for analog material, but it would also be for digital material. So we have a lot of digital files that have been stored on a hard drive from the museum, lots of different hard drives throughout the years. And some of the older hard drives that might be 10 or 15 years old are actually starting to fail. We're seeing that they so we have because that um, because that particular program is in place, that meant that we would prioritize all of our audio, visual, magnetic material to be digitized because we had the facility to be able to do that through the Film and Sound Archive.
Thank you very much for your explanation, Mr. Andrew. And thank you for sharing digital preservation policy of National Museum of Australia. And very important that preservation strategies are guided not only by technical consideration, but also by the cultural and research value of the collection themselves. And my final question, could you elaborate on the concept of format shifting and explain its importance in ensuring the long-term accessibility and preservation of audiovisual heritage?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I'm happy to answer that one. So from the perspective of format shifting, we look at format shifting where we move from one particular format to another for several different reasons. We may need to move from an older format to a newer format because the older format is no longer supported, or the expertise to play that format is no longer available. To give an example, would be, say, an audiovisual example of VHS. So if you were looking at VHS tapes and playback technology, that was fairly recent and widely accessible for many people, whether it was in an institution or whether it was at home domestic players that people could use. And it's interesting to see within the market how quickly VHS technology is no longer available or is harder to get a hold of. So that forces us to move from VHS to a digital file-based format where people can still get access to that particular format. And it's interesting with format shifting because cultural institutions are dealing with format shifting a lot, but format shifting has been happening, say, in the broadcast industry for a very long time. Format shifting is inherent in broadcast technology over the years because of technological improvements in formats. So, say, a television or radio station might move from an open reel audio format to a digital, smaller cassette-based format because that technology is improved. So it's technological improvement, but it's also market forces. So format shifting may have to happen if it becomes harder and harder to be able to get access, or even more expensive to get access to the older format.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew. Your explanation has given us a deeper understanding of how format shifting plays an important role in access to audiovisual heritage collection. Right, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sifwa, for your questions. We also gain new information and insight from Mr. Andrew presentations earlier. Okay, the next three questions will be asked by Hasrina Arum.
Okay, thank you, Oli. Hello, Mr. Andrew. I have the question. The first question what are the primary technical and operational challenges museum face when preserving obsolete digital formats and outdated playback technologies?
Thank you, Hasrina. That's a good question. The primary technical and operational challenges that the National Museum of Australia faces when preserving digital formats and playback technology, one of the main ones within, from an exhibition point of view, is the proprietary and bespoke nature of playback equipment in an exhibition space. So what I mean by that is, say in our public exhibition area, not all technology is as easily interchangeable. So maybe not just a television monitor and a playback server. It could be technology that was made specific for that particular digital interaction. And because it was made specifically for that exhibition, preservation of that material may not have been considered when building that. So it might be harder to not only get the digital information off, but also to be able to replicate that experience in the future. So that's a challenge for the museum. When it comes to obsolete formats, the museum is dealing with obsolete formats in its collection. So we have unsupported formats such as flash video, shockwave video. That type of video was very popular in the 1990s, especially from our museum point of view. It was made in-house a lot. So the digital preservation team needs to support that older technology to be able to give continued access to that. And one final point for that question is that the museum also has, and I'm sure this is with a lot of museums, older video standards, so such as PAL or NTSC broadcast standards. Those standards in Australia are no longer broadcast, but we still have those standards in our archive and our playback technology that we need to, again, format shift from those technologies.
Okay, Mr. Andrew, thank you very much for your answer. The next question for me, to what extent can digital preservation complement or substitute the preservation of physical artifacts, and how should museum balance digital accessibility with physical conservation?
That's a good question as well. Actually, all the questions that are being presented are very good questions and quite thoughtful, so I appreciate them. Thank you. So digital preservation, it's interesting because it's a reasonably new field within our museum. We are looking at different ways to be able to complement physical conservation work. One of those is the idea of documenting the three-dimensional rendering of artworks before and after conservation treatment has been undertaken. And that's something that I had the pleasure to see in action at the Getty Museum in the United States a couple of weeks ago, which was very fascinating, where they were using technology where there was an artwork that there was no conservation treatment, so they made a 3D scan of that particular artwork. The conservator came and did conservation work, physical conservation work on the paint, and then there was a 3D scan done afterwards. So then they were able to see a before and an after of the work that was where the conservation work was applied. And so that data was a reference model of evidence of the conservation intervention that had happened. So there was a digital record that could be used in the future for any other future conservation work. So that record of evidence is quite interesting. Also, the 3D analysis of objects might also, that digital intervention might be very beneficial rather than the physical intervention if the artifacts are too fragile for physical touching, or if the artifacts require a unique environment. Let's say they might be hazardous material. Let's say they could have lead or asbestos. So the digital analysis of that is safer than the actual physical item. And of course, some items the physical location of the item might be hard to get to. So if there's a digital representation, especially a microscopic analysis representation of that item, then that can be viewed anywhere in the world rather than being in front of the physical item itself. And the process of digital preservation, the idea of digital preservation's role in this is to support the ongoing access and the preservation of the data that's created through that process.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Andrew, for your information. This is so, answer is good. Okay, the last question is how digital preservation practice ensure the authenticity, integrity, and reliability of digitized cultural materials over time?
This is a great question when it comes to digital preservation, and there are three critical points of digital preservation. So talking about authenticity, format shifting that we've spoken about previously, authenticity is a very important part to another. There's the opportunity for loss. And that format shifting needs to be thoroughly analysed to make sure that there is no loss or a minimum loss that's acceptable when moving from one format to another. And that also goes for playback technologies or hardware. Some playback technologies of some material, say, I'll give you an example. So maybe a Windows operating system might play back digital audiovisual material different to an Apple Macintosh-based system. So looking at those two playback technologies is important to make sure that the digital cultural material is not lost during that playback process. When it comes to integrity, this is very important from a digital preservation point of view. So one way that we make sure that we keep the integrity of our digital cultural material is by checking the integrity over time. And so by doing that, we do that through a process of checking checksums. And so looking at a checksum, which is an algorithm representation of the particular digital material. So if that's checked over 6 months, 1 year, 3 months, an ongoing period of time to make sure that there has been no changes, there's been no corruption, and there's been no intervention that assists us in making sure the integrity of that material is 100% good. And when it comes to reliability, this is where format support is very important. So when I talk about format support, the idea, it's again, playback technology. The way to understand how reliable a piece of material can be is to have it well documented. And that documentation assists us in to be able to make sure that we give a reliable version or playback experience of that particular material. I do have a link that I'll put in the chat a bit later on, but it relates to looking at format support. From the National Archives in the United Kingdom, they have tools available for us to be able to identify formats. We have a software tool called Droid, which helps us to perform automatic batch identification of formats. So I'll share that later, and that will give us assistance in terms of reliability.
Okay, thank you for your insightful answer, Mr. Andrew.
Welcome.
Okay, thanks for the question from Arum. And we finally get to hear about Mr. Andrew experience at the National Museum of Australia. Okay, I'm sorry.
I've got you.
The first question from me is, how does the National Museum of Australia address the challenge of providing public access to cultural collections while simultaneously protecting fragile or sensitive materials? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I've just posted two policies, additional policies in the chat that relate directly to this question. So while the principal mode of access for the National Museum, it's through exhibitions and access visits, but the museum also promotes research, provides outreach programs, and runs public programs, all of which can involve varying degrees of access to the collections. So when it comes to providing access to collections that may be sensitive or fragile, digitizing those collections is a method of allowing access to those particular collections that might be too fragile physically or in person to access. And those digital collections also are also available for sensitive material. I guess the important point to make around that is, if the material is available, if the sensitive cultural material is digitally available, then there needs to be the appropriate documentation, rights, and processes in place to make sure that that sensitive material is accessed responsibly and in a way that adheres to our own cultural rights and engagement policy, especially around culturally sensitive material from Australia's First Nations material. So we hold in the museum physical objects and digital information that is sensitive and can be restricted. it could be restricted for men's only restricted business, or it could be women's only business. So it's critical for the museum to have that documentation in our collection systems in place to ensure that that material is accessed appropriately.
Okay, thank you for the share. You share the policy and the way National Museum of Australia have addressed this challenge could certainly provide us with valuable insight for the future if we face similar challenge here. Thank you for sharing your experience, Mr. Andrew. The next question from me is, in your view, how are emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and 3D digitizations influencing the future of museum preservation practice?
This is a very interesting area when it comes to museum practice, and it's something that the museum is only just starting to look at. We're very excited, and at the same time, we're quite cautious as well, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. But I can talk about some of the work that we've done so far. At the moment, we have a collection in the National Museum that has library catalogue cards. And those catalogue cards have information about objects on them. So some of that is typed information, and some of it is actually handwritten. So the way that we're looking to use artificial intelligence is through handwritten text recognition. And we've found that that particular technology only recently has become quite powerful, and is potentially a way to be able to open access to collections in a way that would have taken a lot of time and a lot of resource to be able to manually type in a lot of that physical information. Now that those cards are digitized and we can run artificial intelligence over across it, that will potentially give us improved accessibility and discoverability of those particular collections. I do have a 3D digitization example for you. I do have a very small presentation that I'd like to, if we've got time, be able to share with you closer to the end of our chat.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Andrew. Your perspective on AI, machine learning, and 3D digitizations have provided us with new insights, especially since this relates to the future museum preservation practice. Okay, the last question from me is, how important is metadata management within digital preservation systems, and what challenges commonly arise in maintaining accurate and sustainable metadata standards? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Well, metadata management is extremely important in our museum, and it's really our guarantee that we're able to get access and provide access to our collections. So it's extremely important for us to have consistent standard-based metadata, not only for discoverability and for access, but also for interoperability between systems. So we have several different collection systems here at the museum. We have a content management system. We have a digital asset management system. And we're also implementing, as we speak, a digital preservation system, which we call a trusted digital repository, or a TDR system. So to be able to have consistent standard-based metadata ensures us to be able to share information between those systems. So it helps us with searchability across systems. It helps us to categorize different particular cultural material within the collection. We have seen there are definitely challenges that arise when metadata is either inconsistent, incomplete, or inaccurate. For example, inaccurate spelling of particular things. So the way that we work to make the metadata to be consistent is we have fields within our systems that are compulsory. We have drop-down lists that people can choose from, and we have systems and structures in place to be able to have clean, consistent metadata. And that the museum is also assessing our API between systems to also have better interoperability of data between those systems.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Before that, sorry, excuse me. So Sir Andrew asked us to share the link before, right? We can share it for you. Okay, Has. Auli, tolong di-share aja. Ini linknya dibuka aja.
I'm sorry, was that a question for me? I missed that.
No. We're gonna share the link you share. Sorry,
Oh, great.
we're
Okay.
good.
All good.
Skip it.
All good.
All right, sir, you can continue your explanation.
Yeah, that question on metadata management, I've completed that question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your explanation regarding metadata management in the digital preservation systems. This will be very helpful for us moving forwards. All right, the next three questions will be asked by Rahma Anissa.
Okay, thank you, Ali. My first question for Mr. Andrew. What strategies are considered most effective in ensuring the long-term sustainability and accessibility of digital archive amid rapid technological change? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I will share in the chat an example also that I think helps to describe a strategy for looking at documentation. So documentation for the National Museum is definitely critical for the long-term sustainability and accessibility of digital archives. So what I've shared in the chat is a particular item a particular object in the collection, which is known as the WLAN testbed, which is a prototype designed by a scientific organisation here in Australia in the 1990s that was actually the beginning of the invention of Wi-Fi as we know it today. So that particular technology is something that is going to become harder and harder to be able to support and maintain in its current form into the future. So the way to be able to provide access and for the Australian public to learn more about that particular object, the best way for that is for the museum to be able to document what that actually is and how it actually works. And we're lucky at the moment that we've actually have access to the original inventors of that particular invention. So the scientists are available to be able to assist us in their expertise in documenting that WLAN item that you can see on the screen. So those gentlemen in the photo, they are the scientific inventors for that particular piece of technology.
Okay, thank you for the information, Mr. Andrew. The next question for me, how do museums and cultural institutions prepare for digital preservation risks such as data corruption, cybersecurity threats, and technological obsolescence?
Thank you. Yes, well, they're very good points when it comes to digital preservation. So we'll start with data corruption. One method that the museum uses to prepare for a risk like data corruption is to have access to the digital material as early as possible. So then that allows us to be able to apply those integrity checks early in the digital life cycle. So those, as I mentioned previously, those scheduled integrity checking assists us in minimizing the risk of data corruption, as also does having multiple copies as well. So multiple managed copies in different geographic locations. So if we have, let's say, one copy in one location that becomes corrupt for some reason, we're able to replace that from a copy that's in a different location. This can also happen if physically there's a problem with one location. Say, if there's an environmental disaster, such as an earthquake, or if there's flooding, and data becomes corrupt, or there's data lost because of that, the different geographic locations assists and minimizes that risk. When it comes to cybersecurity threats, one thing that we do is that we virus check any digital material that's coming into the museum. And one method that can be used with virus checking is to have a quarantine station, which could be basically a desktop that is offline, not on the internal network. So if we do have a hard drive that comes in and it's plugged into that offline computer for checking, if there was a virus, then it wouldn't travel through the network. It would only be contained within that particular quarantine station. And working in digital preservation means that we need to work very closely with our IT support. And our IT team within the museum is a great advocate and a good friend of the digital preservation team. So by working closely with our IT team, that also helps us to be able to adhere to policies that are put in place to minimize cybersecurity threats. When it comes to technological obsolescence, I mentioned previously Droid for identifying particular file formats. That's from the National Archives of UK. There's also another tool which I'm now linking as well, which is also again from the National Archives of UK, called Pronon. So not only does that identify file formats, but it also is a registry of formats that will become a risk of obsolescence. So if there's an older format that there's a risk of it becoming obsolescent, then that Pronom registry will list that as a file format that is either becoming at risk or is obsolete, which assists museums and archives to be able to prioritize or format shift material that is becoming in danger of technological obsolescence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. And my last question. What competence and professional skills so future librarians, archive, and information specialists develop to contribute effectively to digital preservation initiative? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as digital preservation is a reasonably new field, it seems that people coming into the digital preservation field have got different skill sets and are bringing different skills into the digital preservation space. So having technical skills when dealing with digital preservation is good. It doesn't necessarily need to be everything. There are other skills that need to be in place as well. Having good communication and advocacy skills is really important to be able to promote and describe the risks and challenges of digital preservation, especially to teams and other people who may not be dealing with digital preservation. So being able to explain in a non-technical way digital preservation challenges is a skill, a very specialist skill that is important for that advocacy work, and it's also important from an educational point of view as well, because it's a new field. Digital preservation not only just needs the advocacy, but it also needs that educational side. And I've got 2 links to share with you in regards to that. In New Zealand, there is an organisation called the National Digital Forum, and they have together digital preservation theory YouTube that's free and is very beneficial. It's very, very good, especially to understand some of the technical concepts. And there's also a free resource from the Digital Preservation Coalition called DPC Novice to Know-How. So that's an online course as well, which I've just shared in the chat, which will help with education and knowledge in digital preservation.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Mr. to share the link, and we will check the links after this. And thank you, Rahma, for asking this question. For these questions. So we could gain new insights from Mr. Andrew and Swears. Next up, question is from Hairi.
Thank you, Pauli. And for me, could you share a preservation project or practical case from the National Museum of Australia that demonstrates the successful application of technology in safeguarding cultural heritage?
Thank you for that question. I'd like to share my screen if I can.
Can you give the host to Mr. Andrew? He's wanna share something? Give the host to him.
Okay. Let me just, sorry, I'll just share that again. Okay. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, sir, we can see that.
Okay, thank you. I think that this helps to describe your question in a way that shows how we use modern technology in a way that supports cultural heritage. And I'll just skip through this. So this particular project was digitizing puppets and a puppeteer that the puppets were a part of the collection. So the first phase that we did was the high resolution images of the puppets themselves. So we have very significant puppets. These are puppets from the Norman Hetherington collection. So what we did with these particular puppets was we took many, many photos of them to be able to create a 3D photogrammetry image of the puppets that you can see on the screen. So with that digital information, we were also able to, not just in a digital sense, but also from a physical sense, write the different points on where the strings are attached to the puppets. And what this means with that documentation was that we were able to make a digital twin of the puppet itself. So not just the puppet, but the actual controller of the puppet as well. So we've got different examples of those particular images being, those particular puppets being 3D scanned. And we also not just scan the puppets, but we scan the material that the puppets are made out of. So taking very close up photos, we were able to look at the material and be able to create a digital representation of the material as well. So you can see the different types of material that's used for this particular puppet. They all had to be documented in a way so that we could 3D replicate in a digital sense that puppet is now, there's a digital version of that puppet, which we're calling a digital twin. And so the second phase So so we've got the digital version of the puppet. Then the second phase was to make body motion capture of the puppeteer themselves. So this is important when it comes to intangible heritage. So what we're looking at the moment is cultural and intangible heritage. So rather than just having a puppet in a box, the puppet only means something once it's actually activated and is being used. And that's what we wanted to record, that activation. So the puppeteer has motion sensors, and as they operate the puppet, their body is being recorded. So we have a digital twin of the puppet, and we have a digital twin of the puppeteer as well. So that's cultural heritage that we now have recorded, and we'll look at archiving from a digital preservation point of view. So we've got the motion capture, and we're looking at motion capture technology and the controller. So there's another phase to this particular project, which I think is interesting, is that we'd like visitors and students to be able to put on a virtual reality set, so like one of these previously, and they'll be able to virtually see and control the digital puppet. So rather than touching the original puppet, which is very fragile, they are able to manipulate the digital puppet. And so there we have a virtual puppet system, and we're looking at different digital environments that we can put the digital puppet into as well. So there's a performer view, and then there's also an audience view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Andrew, for share the presentations and that so informations for us, new insight for us. And we will be next. Next question is from Haslina Arum.
Okay, thank you, Oli. Okay, Mr. Andrew, I have the last question, maybe. How important is international collaboration in advancing digital preservation efforts, and what opportunities exist for partnership between museums and academic institutions?
Thank you for that question. And it's a good last question, I think. I think that through the conversations, the questions and the conversations that we're having now is a really good indication where international sharing of information is critical. Because digital preservation is such a new field, and I think it's very important for that sharing, not only for learning, but also to be able to understand different practices that are happening around the world, and also if to be able to build a network. That network is very critical. Say if I've got a question, or if anyone's got a question, to be able to have that network to go outside to say to somebody who has a lot more experience in that type of digital preservation is very important. And just quickly, in terms of how museums and universities or academia work together, the previous puppet project that I showed you was a collaboration between the National Museum of Australia and the University of New South Wales. So it's also a good information to show where universities and cultural institutions work well together, especially with newer technologies.
Thank you for your comments on the importance of international collaborations. All right, actually, this is the final questions will be asked by Sifwa Suhaila.
Thank you, Oli. So, Mr. Andrew, the final question, looking toward the future, how do you envision an evolving role of museum in preserving cultural heritage within an increasingly digital and technology-driven society?
What a great one to finish on. And I think that from a museum point of view, that's a really interesting point. When it comes to digital preservation, especially at the National Museum of Australia, we're coming at digital preservation with the idea that preservation is long-term access. So we want to be able to provide access to the collection, and to be able to do that, we consider preservation as ongoing access. So we're not an archive that stores material in a box that is forgotten about on a shelf. We need to be able to, especially to know that the digital content and is available, which is incredibly important for the museum to be relevant in what you've mentioned, a digital and technology-driven society where there is so much information that's available, especially through the internet, that museums are competing with that level of information. So to be able to represent that digital information in a way that has integrity, that has authenticity, that is safe from a cultural and respectful museum point of view, is a very important role for museums today to be able to play, and that's something that the National Museum of Australia is working in. That's our space we're working in.
Thank you very much for the insightful explanation, Mr. I agree that technology will continue to transform how museums preserve and provide access to cultural heritage in the future. Thank you once again for the insightful discussion and valuable perspective. I would now like to hand the session back to Auli. Thank you.
So that was the last sessions from our discussion today. Can I back to Kak Haura?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Sir Andrew. It's really interesting to see how theories we've been learning in class are applied in real-world situations. Thanks to you for sharing it with us today. We would like to express our sincere gratitude for the meeting for you, Mr. Andrew. So after this discussion session, we would like to kindly request for Mr. Andrew to sign for the implementation of agreement document as part of our international academic collaboration. My team would send the document that they needed to be so like to apologize if there were any misunderstandings, unclear pronunciations, or language limitations during the discussion and translation process. Thank you very much for your understanding and participants today. Very amazing insight. But before we ended it, can we take a picture first for documentation? My team will do a screenshot.
Oh, that's
Okay.
good. Thank you.
One, two, three. All right, thank you, Mrs. Back to Auli.
Okay, that concludes the discussion sessions we just held. Before we wrap up today's focus group discussion, allow me, as the moderator, to extend my deepest gratitude to our guest speaker, Andrew Martin from the National Museum of Australia, for the knowledge, experience, and insights he has shared with us all regarding digital preservation and the use of technology in safeguarding cultural heritage. We hope today's discussion will deepen our understanding of the importance of digital preservation, museum collection management, and the technological challenges and opportunities involved in protecting cultural artifacts for future generations. In closing, we apologize for any shortcomings during discussions. As the moderator, I will now step down. Thank you for your participation, Mr. Andrew. Good afternoon and warm regards.
Good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much for your time. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Terima kasih yang sudah hadir.
Terima kasih ya yang udah datang di Zoom, bisa keluar.